Shabbos is not a luxury. Shabbos is not just a halacha, just a law that's given to us. Shabbos is a survival technique apart from everything else. Of course, Shabbos has all the mitzvahs attached to it as well, but it's a survival mechanism in a crazy world that we're living in, where we can't keep our minds still for a moment, where we're all ADD, we're all over the place. The effect of our smartphones and our screens and what that means to our souls, to our inner beings. Now we've got AI coming along. We focus on how much technology is doing for us, and it is doing for us in a physical sense, but in a spiritual sense, how destructive is it? And we've often talked about the fact that Shomrei Shabbos, people who keep Shabbat, have a competitive advantage in the world. They will be, as we get further and further into this mess of this spiritual and mental mess created in us by technology and by our misuse of technology, those who keep Shabbat, we also talked about learning Gemara, but let's just focus on keeping Shabbat, will have an enormous advantage, because not keeping Shabbat, we might as well be idol worshippers. Not keeping Shabbat, we're denying the very essence of a soul, because if we have a soul, you have to give the soul time. There's no way you can survive in the world without giving time and space for the nefesh, for the neshama. So if you don't give time, and we need a day, at least a day a week for that, if we don't give time for our neshama, we're denying the existence of the neshama, because we're starving it. We wouldn't do that if we really believed in the neshama. And that's why Chilul Shabbat, not keeping Shabbos, is like Avodah Zarah, as we're going to see. But one of the big chidushim of the Matmonim today is that this applies not only to Jews. This applies to humanity. This is something that applies to all people. Although we know Shabbat is given specifically to the Jewish people, and there's some very strict laws about that, nevertheless, we're going to learn that that isn't altogether correct, that the concept of Shabbat is something that is universal and applies to everybody. How quietness unlocks the soul, and quietness is different from silence. Silence is a lack of noise. Quietness is active. It's not passive. Avodah Zarah Daf Samach Daled Amud Beis. Today's the Shloshim of Francis Nordman's mother. Francis is from Zurich. He's sometimes here in the shir, but he's always in the shir virtually. His mother, he tells me, was a tzaddikas who was dedicated to her husband, to her 4 children, and dedicated to making sure that they were educated with Torah and derech eretz. They had a means of earning a living, that they were connected to the world, but that they were steeped in Torah, learning and observance, something which has continued through their generations. But she also focused on people who are lonely and less fortunate. And it's interesting that there's a person like Francis, who probably is anybody here who knows who Francis is even. When he comes, he sits quietly at the back. He sometimes brings his son. You don't even know who he is, but he's with you every single day. He's learning with you every single day, and you don't even know who he is. That's technology. You can have a person who's a chaver, who's sitting and learning with you in the same shir for years. And he says the Matmonim are a real enrichment to our lives. Yeah, he's sitting and he's feeling that this enriches my life, and you don't even know that he exists. That's technology for you. It's wonderful that he can be sitting wherever in the world he is at the time and listening to the shir, and it's terrible that there's no human connection in the process. So we thank Francis for sponsoring the shir. As I've mentioned, the sponsorship is something important. We need it and depend upon it to be able to spread the word of the Matmonim as wide as we do, and hopefully wider. Ezohu Ger Toshav, our Gemara, a very simple Gemara that sends us into a spin, as you're going to see. What is a Ger Toshav? There are 2 types of converts, 2 types of Gerim. One is a convert to Judaism, and one is a convert to monotheism. A Ger Tzedek is a convert to Judaism. A Ger Toshav is a convert to monotheism. He remains a non-Jewish person. He doesn't become Jewish, but he gives up idolatrous practice. So there are many, many non-Jewish people today who have the din of a Ger Toshav. They don't believe in idolatry. And even according to many, Christianity is not an idolatrous religion. It would be if a Jew believed in Shituf, in God plus a Trinity and all sorts of things, then that would be a problem. But for non-Jews, it's not a problem. It's monotheism. And Islam, according to many, is monotheism. And many people who don't practice any religion at all, but they don't believe in idols. They believe in a force. They believe in Hashem. Those are all Ger Toshavim if they are absolutely public about their denial of idolatry. Who is a Ger Toshav? Kol shekibel alav bifnei gimel chaverim shelo la'avoid avodas kechovim, divrei Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says a Ger Toshav, one who is converted to monotheism, is one who has declared in front of 3 Talmidei Chachomim, 3 Rabbonim, 3 rabbis, that he has given up on avodah zarah, that he rejects idolatry. The Chachamim omrim, and Chachamim say, which is how we paskin, kol shekibel alav sheva mitzvah shekiblu aleim b'nei Noach. It's not sufficient to give up on idolatry. One has to accept all the mitzvot of the b'nei Noach, which most Ger Toshavs do. The mitzvahs of the b'nei Noach is to believe in Hashem, not to serve idolatry, not to eat from a live animal, certain laws of sexual propriety, not murdering. These are all laws, setting up a legal system that works. These are all things that most of the civilized world keeps. So there are many, many people who have the din of a Ger Toshav. Now, to understand this, what sets us in a spin is a piece of Tosafot of Rabbi Yehuda Sirilion. Rabbi Yehuda Sirilion, I'm going to take you into the world of the Tosafot for a moment. Rabbi Yehuda Sirilion, or he's sometimes known as Harimi Paris, the Ri from Paris, because that's where he had his yeshiva. So who is, before we go into him, who is the Ri Sirilion? The Ri Sirilion is a Talmud and nephew of the Ri who now sets up Tosafos. Ri is the great-grandson of Rashi. The Rabbeinu Yehuda Sirilion is the Ri's Talmud and his nephew. So he's descended from Rashi as well. You can get an idea of when he lived. There's a Sefer Tzeder L'Derech that describes the Ri's teaching, his educational methodology. And through that we see how the Tosafos evolved and developed. It's fascinating. So the Ri, up to then we've got Rashi, and we've got Rashi's sons-in-law, the Rabbeinu Tam and the Rashbam and so on. And then we've got Ri, who starts this new way of learning, which is the Tosafos that we have today. He never wrote the Tosafos. The Tosafos were written by his Talmidim. He gave the Shiurim and his Talmidim wrote it. Who were his Talmidim? He had 60 Talmidim used to sit in his shiur. Each Talmid used to be an expert in one Masechta. So there are just over 60 Masechtas. Each Talmud knew one Masechta, one tractate of the Talmud. Each disciple knew by heart. He knew it inside out. He knew every halacha and every din in that one law. The Ri would give his shiur, and he would suggest all these ideas like we have in Tosafos, questions and answers, and new halachic conclusions emerging from these questions and answers. And then he would ask the 60 students to challenge him, each one from their own position of knowledge. So that way he got challenged by the whole of Shas. And it's interesting, he didn't rely on his own knowledge of Shas, although he obviously knew it well. He wanted 60 experts to sit there, so they heard him teach the halakha, and then from their position of expertise, each one from their own Masechta, they shared their questions and answers with everybody. So everybody's learning these Tosafos. That's what the Tosafos is, this additional layer of understanding that was developed in that Beis HaMedrash. And who sat in that Beis HaMedrash? One very important person who sat in that Beis HaMedrash was the Ri's own son, Rabbeinu Elchanan. And Rabbeinu Elchanan, unfortunately, was killed al Kiddush Hashem while his father was still alive. And he's one of the Talmidim who sit there and who write up the Ri's Shiurim into Tosafos. So many of our Tosafos, as you're going to see, are written by Rabbeinu Elchanan. And sitting there also is the Ri Sirilion, this Rabbeinu Yehuda, the Ri's nephew and Talmud, is also sitting there. Sitting there is Rabbeinu Baruch Baal HaTruma, the Baal HaTruma, the Rabbeinu Baruch is sitting there. The Ri Sirilion's Talmud, one of them, is the Or Zarua, who we spoke about recently, is that important link, because the Or Zarua learned in the French school of Tosafos, and he learned in the German school of Tosafos, and he becomes the Rebbe of the Maharam Rutenberg, which becomes the foundation of all our halachic system. So the Or Zarua that is pivotal in the evolution of halacha is a Talmud of this Ri Sirilion. And the Ri Sirilion asks a question on Rashi based on this Gemara. The Rashi is in Yevomis, it isn't here. The Ri Sirilion asks a question on Rashi in Yevomis based on our Gemara. To understand his question, we've got to look at two psukim, one closely and one less closely. The two psukim one is from the Ten Commandments as written in Parshas Vayetchanan, and one is in Parshas Mishpatim just after the laws of Shemitah. Let's just start with the Ten Commandments, the second one. V'yom hashvi Shabbat l'Hashem Elokecha lo ta'aseh kol melacha. There's a Shabbos, you can't do any melacha. You, ata vincha v'techa v'avdecha v'amatecha v'shocha v'chamocha v'chol be'emtecha. You, your servants, your maidservants, everybody, even your oxen, your animals. V'gercha asher b'sha'arecha. And your gerim, your converts, have to keep Shabbos as well. You can't use a convert to do melacha for you. In Parashas Mishpatim it says, Sheshit Yamim Te'aseh Ma'asecha, for 6 days your work will be done. Look at that word by the way. It does not say Ta'aseh here. You will do it. It will be done. Your work will be done, possibly by AI. It doesn't matter by who it's done. That's only 6 days that you let it. Even if you're using AI, you use it for 6 days. Uv'yom hashvi tishbot. And on Shabbos you stop. Why do you stop? Here it doesn't say you must stop and your oxen must stop and your maidservants must stop and your servants. It doesn't say that. It says, Lema'an, you must stop so that so that your animals and your servants and maidservants and the ger, the convert, will rest. You must stop so that they rest. Because if you don't stop, they'll be working as well, and that's not okay. Says the Gemara in Yevonis, V'hager ze Ger Toshav. When it says V'hager, that means a Ger Toshav. That means somebody who has converted to monotheism, not somebody who's converted to Judaism. Atameh ze Ger Toshav v'eno Ger Tzedek. Are you sure? Maybe it means somebody converted to Judaism. If you look at the Aseret HaDibrot, if you look at the Ten Commandments, there it talks about a Ger Tzedek, about a true convert. Hamani mekayim v'hager. So in Parashas Mishpatim, when it says v'hager and the convert, what is it talking about? Ze Ger Toshav. This is somebody who's converted to monotheism, not somebody who's converted to Judaism. So based on this Gemara, you see quite clearly that non-Jews, Gentiles who do not practice idolatry, have to keep the Shabbat. Why? What are they doing keeping the Shabbat? Says Rashi, unbelievably innovative Rashi. Just look at this. Rashi comes and teaches us something, and when it's amazing. Ger Toshav shekibel alav shelo la'avod avodat kochavim ve'ochel neveilot. This is a non-Jew. He eats treif, but he doesn't serve idolatry. He doesn't keep the mitzvot of the Torah. He eats treif. There's no reason why he shouldn't eat non-kosher food, but he doesn't serve idolatry. V'hizhiro hakatuv al Shabbat, and such a non-Jew is commanded on the Shabbat. Why? Because the Gemara says if you profane the Shabbos, that's like serving idolatry. And Rashi's Bechadish, that's not only for Jews, that's for anybody. If you profane the Shabbat, you're denying the existence of the soul. And that's Avodah Zarah. That's idolatry. Wow, what a Rashi. And it's on this Rashi that the Risiri Leon comes to the attack. And he says, now remember, the Risiri owns the Talmud of the Ri, and he sits in the Ri, so you can imagine where he gets this from. This attack probably comes from the Ri, who was his Rebbe. And the Ri is Rashi's great-grandson. So you see what's happening here. So the Rabbeinu Yehuda asks 3 or 4 questions on Rashi. Firstly, he says, he brings the Rashi, and he says, then they've got 8 mitzvot. Then it's the 7 mitzvot of Noach plus Shabbat. Why does our Gemara say he's only got 7 mitzvot? If Rashi in Yevomis is right. Non-Jews are not allowed to practice idolatry, but where do we find that they've got to keep Shabbat? Why are they linked? And furthermore, we've said in Sanhedrin that a Gentile is not allowed to keep Shabbat fully for all sorts of reasons. And it's a serious offense if a goy keeps. So when a person's in the process of converting and hasn't yet converted, but is already keeping things and he's getting into things, we make sure that he does something on Shabbos to profane the Shabbos. Turn a light on, write something, do something every Shabbos, because until you're Jewish, you're not allowed to keep the Shabbat. So how is this guy allowed to keep Shabbat? And furthermore, Rabbi Akiva holds that a Ger Toshav ein Muzar Shabbos. He says clearly that a Ger Toshav, one who has converted to monotheism, is not required to keep the Shabbat. Ufirish, and so he answers. He doesn't say who. He says he asked and he answered. Who is the he? We'll see in a moment. Ufirish hadam rinan b'chodesh the Ger Toshav Muzar Shabbos. I disagree with Rashi. He says it's not that he has to keep Shabbos, but zeu k'she'oseh melacha le Yisrael. The chidush is he can't do anything for a Jewish person. So he's a non-Jewish person who's living among the Jewish people. They're living in the same city. They're neighbors. You can't call him to do something for you because it's a Ger Toshav, the Koyakra, and he proves it. And then at the end he signs it. He says, Arav Rabbeinu Elchanan. So this was actually a Tosafot by Rabbeinu Elchanan. Where does Rabbeinu Elchanan get it from? His father, the Ri. And in fact, the Tosafot in Yevomus, we won't go through it now, it is almost identical to what we've just learned. So either the Tosafot in Yevomus was written by Rabbeinu Elchanan, which is not the way, certainly the first part of the Tosafot in Yevomus, the academics consider was written by the Rashi Shantz, who was also one of the Talmudim among the 60. But we see here, this Tosafot was probably written by Rabbeinu Elchanan, or Rabbeinu Elchanan is quoting, they're both quoting the Ri. Clearly the Ri is the source of this divergence from Rashi. Rashi's incredible chidush that a non-Jew is obligated to keep Shabbat in some form, and the Ri's rejection of that. To understand Rashi, but what is Rashi? How do we understand Rashi? To understand Rashi, look at the verse clearly. You've got to keep Shabbat, leman yanuach, in order that your animals will rest, v'yinafesh ben amatecha v'ageh. And this word v'yinafesh, we have it in V'shamru, v'yinafash. What does that mean, that Hashem rests? And we've got to read, what does the word v'yinafash means? It comes from the word nefesh. V'hager, and this person, this non-Jew who doesn't practice idolatry, he too must be v'yinafash, and you must keep Shabbat so that he keeps Shabbat. What does it mean? Says Unkelus, v'yinafash means v'yishkot, quietness. That's what v'yinafash means, the quietness of Shabbos. To have a Shabbos that's hectic. You've got your rush off to shul, and then you've got a kiddush, and then they come home, and then you're preparing lunch, and then you've got 50 people for lunch, and then you hang out with the 50 people, and then something else happens, and then you're getting ready for mincha, and then the shalosh shudas, and you come out of Shabbos exhausted. That's not Shabbos. Shabbos is v'yishkot. Give your mind a chance to rest. Rabbi David Tzvi Hoffman says, and the idea here is that our rest, our quietness on Shabbos should spill over to our non-Jewish friends and associates. These people are here not to serve us. Even our servants are not here to serve us. We're all here to serve God. And if we're here to serve God, your mind needs time to serve God. Give them space to serve God. Give them time to serve God. It doesn't matter that they're not Jewish. If they're idolaters, you don't have to worry. They can take care of themselves. But if they are God-serving people, if they are God-fearing people, your job as a Jewish employer is to make sure that they've got time to rest their minds and to access their souls. Because says Rabbi Yaakov Tzvi Mecklenburg, he was the forerunner of Hirsch. He was the first one who it's called Haktava Kabbalah, his sefer, the written word and the traditional word. He links together the traditions of oral tradition with the words of the Torah. That's what Haktava Kabbalah does. He's at the beginning of the Reform period where they were trying to separate and to say, we keep the laws of the Torah. It's just these rabbinic laws we think are archaic. The Ketava Kabbalah was the first one who showed how integral they are and how inseparable they are. And he writes, when an employee works, all of his spiritual powers are narrowed down and constricted into his employment. It's on your work all the time. He's thinking about his work and looking at his iPhone and on his computer. Where's the time for himself? And his thoughts and ideas are all limited. He's got no time to take his mind away from that and to apply his mind to spirituality. And this exhausts people, it depletes people from spirituality. But if you give a person margoa u'menucha, if you give him that quietness, that opportunity for quietness, nafsho chozeret al tiv'ah harishon litpashet bekochotea u'lishtotet berayonim shonim ze mizeh. It allows the space for your mind to travel and to imagine and to innovate and to connect with spirituality. You need the space for that. And to stop work for 24 hours allows the space for that. And that's a universal law of humanity. It's not just for Jewish people. And that brings happiness and pleasure to the soul. That's why it says vayinafash. This enlightens, this replenishes the soul, the neshama. That's vayinafash. To replenish the soul, you've got to take a time of sheket. You've got to take a time of quietness, and you have to do that once a week, whether you're a Jew or you're a Gentile. And therefore, we can begin to understand all the answers to Tosafot and to Rabbi Yehuda Sir Leon's questions on Rashi, because we're not talking about keeping Shabbos technically. This is not about saying Kiddush. This is not about not turning the lights on. This is not about not doing melachot. That's not what it's about. It's about taking time off work. It's about escaping from the craziness. It's about turning your technology off for a day. And there's now research which is being spread throughout the world that people need 1 day a week that they're not on technology. Nothing to do with anything Jewish. It's just neurological research that shows the impact of having a Shabbos, of having a day of the week when you're not connected to technology. This is not about keeping Shabbos technically. A non-Jewish person, even a Ger Toshav, is not allowed to keep Shabbat 100% technically as we do. That's not for him. Then he must become Jewish if that's what he wants to do. What this is talking about is taking a day off from technology, taking a day off from work, so that Lama'an, if you look at the Pasuk, that's what it says. Lama'an yanuach shorcha v'chamecha v'yinafesh ben amatecha v'ager. You need to do it so that they will rest as well. If the entire Jewish nation would turn off their technology on Shabbos, the rest of the world would go quiet as well. Just imagine that there are no Jews on their technology anywhere. All the Jewish people, think of where they are in the world of technology. You've got the head of Google says, we're turning Google off for Shabbos. This is my company, I'm Jewish, we're turning Google off for Shabbos. Imagine a few more like that. What would the world be like for Shabbos? What would it look like for Shabbos? That's what Hashem wants from us. That the Jewish people are taking that time off so that the rest of the world also takes that time off. And that's why the Rambam says, Shabbat ועבודה zarah, kol achat mishtem shkula keneged she'ar kol hamitzvot Torah. That's why Shabbos and Avodah Zarah are interlinked and are equal to all the other mitzvahs of the Torah. Because if you don't keep Shabbat, you're not allowing space for the soul. If there's no space for the soul, that's Avodah Zarah. That's exactly what idolatry is. And not keeping Shabbat, Jew and Gentile, in the sense of that space for the soul to find its place. And he goes on to say, and that's why if you publicly live a life without Shabbat, not giving your soul the chance to explore and to expand and to travel and to connect with Hashem and to connect with spiritual things, not allowing any time for that, that's an idolatrous existence. It's got nothing to do with the technicalities of Shabbos. And therefore, it's almost as if to say, Chas v'Shalom, kind of like the Ri and his Talmudim missed the point with Rashi. Obviously, they have a different way of looking at it, but they kind of missed the point of Rashi when they disagree with him. When Rashi says that his Hiru HaKatuv, we're talking about a Ger Toshav, we're talking about a non-Jew who is not an idolater, and we've said that's most of the non-Jews in the civilized world today. V'ziro hakatuv ala Shabbat. This non-Jewish person is obligated, in terms of the Pasuk in Mishpatim, to observe the Shabbat. Not technically, but spiritually. Because if you desecrate the Shabbat, even if you're a non-Jew, that's like serving idolatry, because there's no space for your spiritual mind to find its expression and for you to connect to the divine.